As we know, NANASE is a kind extrovert, and although he is one of the few nice people in Blue Lock, his fate in joining the U20 team is not known. As it was recently NANASE'S birthday, and with the upcoming PXG vs Bastard Munich game, I want to make a dedicated video for him. And in this video I'm going to talk more in depth about NANASE and what his future has in store, including his actual weapon, his ego, and his potential awakening in the PXG game. And with a small preview will be him developing egocentrism and a protagonism high as he finds a way to stop Hiyori and Isugi in one play. We are introduced to NANASE in the third selection, and so his awakening and gameplay prior is unknown. We do know he placed 99th in the second selection, but since this is the clear order and not the individual rankings, as we know other characters like Shido and Karasu have high ranks, then NANASE'S high ranking of 99 is not indicative to his actual skill level. And if my shoe theory from ages ago was correct about him being a Team Z player, like Isugi, then perhaps he had his own journey and awakening with potential teammates like Sunzaki and Endoji. But there isn't enough information to gauge his actual skill level prior to the third selection Team A vs Team B match. So let's start right before this match. In the hallway he introduces himself politely to both Isugi and Hiyori. His introduction sets up his character as some sort of country bumpkin, and recently confirmed he is from Ibaraki. But that's not the important part, it's the fact he is the one to initiate the conversation, displaying his extroverted and kind nature. Someone who tries to understand his teammates before the match actually starts. His willingness to connect with other players may be key to what his actual specialty and niche for his team would be. I also want to highlight that when he's introducing himself he says he is a first year, i.e. he is likely younger than both Isugi and Hiyori. If we look at Nico, we know he's the youngest player left in Blue Lock, and I've seen people call him a prodigy for his age as he started soccer late and his physical age. But NANASE is potentially only a month older than Nico. He is also a young prodigy himself. And on his last birthday, the official Twitter described him as a young talent with an infinite room to grow. And I want to emphasize that since a lot of people never saw this tweet and are too fixated on him being bad from his previous performance, but they ignore his potential growth. And so for the rest of the video, you'll have to remember that he has improved and will continue to grow on PXG. And so going back to the manga, before the match we see him say no hard feelings, and the key line we see from him is that he is set on playing for Japan's team. This could be our first glimpse of what his actual ego and ambitions of being pro are, and may hint to him actually joining the top 23, although his chance is still low if you've seen my other video. Or at least hint to him playing in a Japanese club in the future. Once they enter the Team A vs Team B match, we see once again the first thing NANASE does is greet Rin and Shido. He is once again initiating some sort of emotional connection with the other players from before the match starts. Now let's talk about his actual gameplay as a player. Well, NANASE didn't contribute or touch the ball in the first few plays, but something to note before he does anything is that Karasu, who is hyper analytical and someone who watches all the games, refers to Isugi as the worst and weak point of the team, including NANASE. Karasu's judgment was more about his individual capabilities, which at this point in the story is believable that NANASE indeed had better individual skills than Isugi, but should be noted he isn't dreadful like some other players like Igaguri. So coming into the match, NANASE isn't portrayed as dreadful, just not as good as other top tier Blue Lock players. The match continues with Karasu once again saying Isugi is holding back everyone else on their team. Now we get our first interaction with NANASE in the actual game, and that's when he comes to stop Karasu with the other two. But alas, they fail to defend and Karasu assists Otoya. The score eventually ties 2-2 with no one but the top 6 doing anything of note, and Team B eventually getting the advantage without NANASE displaying anything yet. With Otoya and Karasu making it difficult for Rin, Isugi and Hiyori to get through, we see NANASE finally show and do something, and that is understand the correct spot to be in. He enables a new link for Team A, and we see specifically that he can understand Isugi's movements, but not the top 2, but positions himself in an optimal way for the rest of the team, and begins his short passing, and so Team A score again, with Isugi admitting that NANASE was the reason the goal existed. He officially showed his worth for the team. Once NANASE got online, Isugi similarly began to improve, and Team A starts to get a lot stronger. He allows a lot more opportunities for Isugi as he acted as a close support, similar to Corona in Bastard Munich. So our current observation is that he found an optimal spot and can trade short passes as he provides a new link between the players. As the counterattack, we see Isugi's opinion of NANASE, which isn't in high regard, and although we know that, The fact is he could still coexist with the rest of Team A and show his worth, which is why he made the U20 bench. We get to the final point, winner takes all with Shido Steel, and we see Nanase enter flow, and once again he emphasizes his current position as he successfully passes to Isugi. Once again, Nanase positions himself in a way close to Isugi, and successfully they form a triangle formation to get past the Toya. One small thing to note is that Nanase can pass with both feet, and although most people can use both legs, his dominant foot has not been confirmed yet. Isugi scores the final goal with Team A's victory, and we have the small trio all proving their worth and making the U20 bench, although Nanase never played in the U20 match, like the other two. After the conclusion, we see him celebrate with Isugi praising his final goal, and we see his reaction describing an awakening, which may hint to his own awakening in the future. After the match, Isugi further explains his movements as Nanase listens, which may help him down the line as he learns from him. As Isugi and Hiyori talk about reflex and what he learned, Nanase is talking and trying to understand himself, which could relate to his development in PXG where he may move reflexively too. We also get a glimpse of Nanase's mind and opinion on Isugi, and that is he can understand him although no one else on the field, which could mean in the PXG game that he could stop a Metavision user like Isugi, or find a way to reflexively stop Hiyori and Isugi if he awakens or continues to understand him. And with the gameplay done, let's summarize what we've learned from the third selection. Well, we know that whether it is by instinct or not, he found opportunities and positions to help the team with his off the ball movements, and we know he acts as a link and enables connections between his teammates. We also know that at this point in time that his passing and trapping were suboptimal, but that also gives him room for growth in the future. So what else do we know about him? Well, his Eagles Bible profile didn't have much information about him. We see his favourite manga and song, but honestly I couldn't really find any meaningful information within it. Besides that, I found two potential hints to his potential weapon and awakening. Firstly is about his name. As we know, some characters' names may hint towards their personality and talent, so let's look at his name, Nanase Nichiro. Well, from the wiki we see Nichiro mean Rainbow Sun, while Nanase means 7 star. There are alternative meanings to their names, but I'll consider the wiki's meaning as the primary one. A common theme between his two names is the concept of light. As we know, rainbows are the refraction of the sun's light, meanwhile a star is a very luminous ball of gas which emits light. Since every character has their own ego color, we see that Nanase's is a light purple, which is basically violet, as a lot of characters' egos match their eye color, although there are a few exceptions. Now knowing this, we have gathered the idea of light, rainbow and the color violet, and so what do these have in common? Well, my first thought is the idea of the electromagnetic spectrum. For a human, we observe something called visible light, as our eyes detect their wavelengths, which includes all the colors in the rainbow like his name. Now ultraviolet light has the same color as his ego's color, which is violet. UV have shorter wavelengths than visible light and are invisible to the regular human eye. Well, we can use a UV flashlight to detect these invisible wavelengths. So what does all the science mumbo jumbo have to do with Nanase? Well, I think that's part of his potential weapon. I want to say I don't expect him to see UV light literally, but perhaps like how UV can identify hidden objects, he can figuratively see opportunities and spots no one else on the field can see. Which is why in his introduction and first play in the match, we see him sprint and see this opportunity, a spot where his off the ball movements can shine. Which leads to my next point about him not being that good yet. As we know, he couldn't understand Rin or Shido's movements, which are called their wavelengths. He could only read Isugi, and so maybe his development in the future is increasing his vision range and metaphoric spectrum to include significantly better players and their wavelengths. So a potential awakening is that he can see these opportunities that only he can see, but then increase his vision to include movements and opportunities from better players like Rin into his formula and equation. And by utilizing his own off the ball movements in conjunction with this, means he can further awaken it and improve as a player. Well, that's one potential weapon in awakening, but another idea I can think of leads more into the idea of connections and the concept of soldering. Another Twitter post stated that his best subject in school is soldering, which sounds weird since it's such a niche subject. Well, soldering is basically joining and forming a bond between two pieces of metal, which is used in electronics. So you can see this as some sort of process of connecting, which correlates to his character as he formed emotional connections with the other players on the field, while also connecting with the players by acting as a support outlet in his actual gameplay. Bringing up his colour again, we see his colour is also purple, which is a colour that represents friendship and harmony, which matches his personality. So an alternative view is he can solder different people on the team metaphorically, and what I mean by this is that he can solder, i.e. form chemical reactions between the players, with himself. For example, utilizing Tokomitsu and Rin in his own strengths, and solidifying and improving the trio by creating a chemical reaction between the three. Similarly, in the third selection, he could form a bond with Isagi and Hiyori, as they use their triangle formation. And so I think his specialty will be his triangle formation and connection between two other players, which can mean he can be slightly different to Corona, who just seemed like a plain upgrade. With them having similar styles, we will potentially see a matchup in the final game, especially if you consider the positions. So an awakening could be he finds a way to consistently team up with new pairs on the team by soldering different combinations, for example providing a new link for different combinations like Shido and Rin, Karasu and Tokomitsu, etc. And so I think his two key strengths are his ability to identify unique opportunities and movements, as well as being an outlet to connect other players like a supporting character. Since we don't know his specific talent yet, those two potential weapons are what I think his niche will be. But what happens if he develops and awakens a new weapon in the PXG game? Metavision is a strong ability. By using their peripheral vision constantly and gaining more information, they can read the field at a magnitude higher than other players. Mainly the intelligent players like Isagi, Hiyori and Aiku all have developed it, and it won't be uncommon for other pros in the future. Now Metavision itself is usually reserved for smart characters, but since NANASE hasn't shown any hint towards having it, I think it's highly unlikely, although a non-zero chance. But the reason I bring up Metavision is because I want to further delve into Isagi's specific Metavision. In the Manshine match, we know Isagi understood Kai'Sa and adopted his Metavision to his own playstyle, and doing so elevated his play. However, that was not enough to defeat Kai'Sa. Towards the final point of the match, Isagi understands the concept of egocentrism and protagonism from both Nagi and Yuki, and uses it in conjecture with his Metavision to go even beyond Kai'Sa's, with him admitting he lost the battle as Isagi outplays him in the final play. The most defining characteristic about NANASE is his kindness, politeness and his extroverted nature, as he talks to everyone. I want to mention this because it could be a hint to him awakening and developing an egocentrism too. As Isagi explains, the egocentrism relies on one's own story, and we see him further explain it to Noah, where understanding protagonism can reduce the opponent's level of play while enabling chemical reactions with teammates. But the thing is, NANASE likely won't have Metavision as he isn't portrayed as intelligent, so he will only have egocentrism exclusively. So if NANASE understands other people's egocentrism, then he can incorporate it into his own gameplay, although without Metavision. But without it, how can he utilize egocentrism efficiently and improve as a player? Well, if you remember after the Team A vs Team B match, Hiyori and Isagi teach him the concept of reflex. So instead of using Metavision and calculating the field, he'll move by reflex based on instinct, and incorporating this newfound protagonism. So I'm expecting NANASE'S awakening to be him using his ultraviolet eyes to find opportunities only he can see, while the soldering part of his character is him understanding the protagonism of his teammates to force chemical reactions between them, enhancing their play, while lowering their play of the enemies. Another reason I think he may develop egocentrism and a protagonism eye is the fact NANASE'S main relationships are with Hiyori and Isagi during the third selection. And so I think it's fitting that NANASE will have protagonism, Hiyori having the standard Metavision, and Isagi having both. And I'm expecting his key moment in the match is for him to interrupt reflexively a potential super goal from Hiyori and Isagi. I also want to briefly talk more about his future. NANASE is competing for the final spot in the roster against Fukaku, Ikiguri and Kiora. He's one rank from making the cutoff and shy of 12 mil from tying for that spot. I did see one theory where all four tie and they have a penalty shootout to decide who makes the final spot, but it doesn't have much basis yet and unlikely to happen, but it would be entertaining. It is Fukaku's spot to lose, and I want to emphasize this even if they need a backup goalie. He can't increase his bid, and so it's feasible that NANASE surpasses this salary, especially since he already got a 13 mil increase. If he gets the same increase, then he'll overtake him in the ranking. So what are my expectations for NANASE in the PXG game? Well, I expect him to improve his touch like Loki directed him, and doing so increases the speed of his triangle formation with Rin and whoever. I then think he will be involved in Rin's super goal. Later in the match, I expect him to match up against Corona, as they share similar playstyles in opposing sides of the field, with Corona likely getting the better of him. And then I think he'll have his awakening moment to stop Izaki and Hiyori's super goal reflexively, with his newly developed egocentrism. Besides that, I'm not expecting much from him, especially looking at how shafted some characters were last match, like Ryu and Kunigami, so him being like the 6th most important on the team means his contribution will be extremely limited and only involved in a few notable plays. But this is just my bias and optimism, as I like him. There's a good chance he doesn't do much, although I think his involvement in the game will be more than what people expect. Hopefully he does well, and with the final spot being so competitive, we will have to wait and find out if he survives the top 23. With that being said, thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't, and have a good day.